There is a watch cheaper than a tank of gas, yet it appeared on the arms of presidents and actors. Omega even tried to replace it on the president's wrist. Instead, the watch ended up in the Smithsonian Institution, alongside items that changed the country. It is the Timex Ironman, and its story reveals what makes something truly iconic. Timex was one of America's most influential and iconic watch brands. Long before most of its rivals even existed, then came the quartz crisis. Watches became cheaper to manufacture, more accurate, and nearly maintenance-free. Japanese brands seized the moment, building new icons from scratch. Meanwhile, Timex seemed to lose its way. Rather than leading, the company started imitating, chasing competitors' successes, while quietly gutting the marketing budgets of its own signature models. The consequences were severe. American watch brands fell one by one. Only those willing to reinvent themselves entirely would survive. The rest would simply vanish. And so, in 1979, Timex posted losses despite turning over hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. The question became unavoidable. What does it actually mean to reinvent yourself? In near desperation, Timex's management made a decision that, on paper, seemed almost absurd. They entered the personal computer market. In 1982, they released the Timex Sinclair 1000, one of the cheapest home computers ever made, and the first in the United States to break the symbolic $100 barrier. In its first year, over 600,000 units were sold. Within 2 years, the project collapsed entirely. Competition from Commodore and Atari was overwhelming, and Timex lacked the resources, infrastructure, and expertise to fight on that battlefield. So they returned to what they had always done best. But the real reason Timex survived had nothing to do with computers. It reached all the way back to a decision made decades earlier. During the Second World War, armies needed reliable, rugged, affordable watches capable of surviving field conditions. Timex secured government contracts to supply exactly that, and the company executed flawlessly. That wartime discipline, the relentless focus on durability and value, did not stay in the past. It became the philosophical backbone of everything Timex made afterward. From that foundation came one of the most memorable slogans in American advertising history: "Takes a licking and keeps on ticking." But it was never just a tagline. Timex backed it up publicly and without a safety net. In their advertisements, watches were dropped from aircraft, bolted to underwater vessels, and strapped to the wrists of stunt performers mid-stunt. After every punishment, the watch kept running. The brand took it further by partnering with television host John Cameron Swayze, a journalist whose audiences trusted him implicitly, for a series called Torture Tests that was broadcast live. What made these segments genuinely powerful was that they were open. Journalists and independent observers were invited to watch. Any failure would have been catastrophic for the brand's reputation. None came. Timex held up every time, and in doing so, raised the standard for the entire industry. By 1962, 1 in every 3 watches sold in the United States was a Timex. Durability, though, was only half the story. The other half was belonging. Timex understood early that a watch does not just tell time, it tells a story about the person wearing it. Nowhere was this clearer than in its partnership with the Walt Disney Company. Mickey Mouse appeared on dials, and suddenly a simple, affordable Timex became the watch that taught children to read time, while giving them their favorite character on their wrist. It was one of the earliest examples of mass-market branded merchandise in history. The collaboration lasted decades, and formed a meaningful part of the company's revenue. When it eventually ended, it was not simply the conclusion of a licensing agreement, it was the close of an ERA in which Timex had been woven into the childhood of an entire nation. The lesson Timex took from the war years was simple but profound: become the undisputed best within a specific niche. In 1986, they acted on it. The Ironman was not another sports watch, it was something different from the start. Its design was led by John T. Houlihan, a former General Motors automotive designer who had worked on the Buick Boattail Riviera in direct collaboration with elite athletes, including 4-time marathon champion Alberto Salazar. For the first time, a watch watch had been built alongside the people who would actually use it, not simply handed to them afterward. The proof of concept came 2 years earlier, in 1984, when Timex brought 1,500 triathlon watches to the Ironman World Championship in Hawaii. Every single unit sold on the first day at $34.95 each. The demand was unmistakable. In 1986, Timex acquired the rights to the Ironman name and released the definitive digital version, water-resistant to 100 meters, and equipped with a stopwatch, a countdown timer, and lap memory, precisely the tools serious athletes needed, nothing more, nothing less. Even the colorway had an unlikely origin, a car parked outside the Timex office that caught a designer's eye. That accidental choice became the visual language the entire sports watch industry would spend years trying to replicate. The cultural reach of the Ironman extended far beyond athletics. Bill Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States, wore an Ironman long before he reached the White House, first as governor of Arkansas, then throughout the early years of his presidency. At his 1993 inauguration, a blue and black Ironman triathlon was on his wrist. It was one of the first times a digital sports watch appeared on the world's official stage. The reaction was immediate. Omega ran an advertisement strongly implying the president might want to reconsider his choice. Washington Post journalist Gene Weingarten described the watch pointedly as a plastic brick, as attractive as a hernia. Clinton kept wearing it. That was the most valuable advertising Timex never paid for. He eventually stopped wearing it publicly, but one of his original Ironmans was later donated to the Smithsonian Institution as part of its permanent historical collection. Clinton wasn't alone. Steve Carell, in an interview, said, "I have a Timex with a light on it, probably my favorite watch." There was a pause. Then he said, "I think I bought it at Target." That light, the Indiglo backlight introduced in 1992, became its own legend. A single button press illuminated the entire dial with even, cool electroluminescence. It debuted on Ironman sport models and eventually became standard across most of the Timex lineup. Its significance turned out to reach well beyond training runs. On February 26, 1993, following the bombing of the World Trade Center, a person evacuating through darkened stairwells used the Indiglo glow of their Timex to guide a group of strangers safely out of the building. Timex never turned this into a campaign. They did not need to. Stories like that travel on their own, and they carry more weight than anything a marketing department could manufacture. By the early 2000s, the terrain shifted again. Garmin and Polar began releasing GPS-enabled sports watches. Suddenly, an athlete could track not just time and pace, but route, distance, heart rate, and cadence in real time. The functional gap between a basic digital watch and a GPS computer on the wrist widened rapidly. Timex responded. The company released models with GPS, heart rate monitors, and Bluetooth connectivity. None found significant traction. The brand was running to catch a field that had already pulled away. But while Timex struggled at the technological frontier, something else was quietly happening, something the company had never planned for and could not have manufactured if it tried. In 2006, the film Stranger Than Fiction opens with a narrator's voice that begins, "This is a story about a man named Harold Crick and his wristwatch." The director did not reach for a Rolex. He did not choose an Omega. He put an Ironman on Will Ferrell's wrist because an Ironman looks honest. An entire generation of Americans had grown up wearing one. Any child enrolled in a single sport during the 1990s almost certainly received an Ironman at some point. Those children became adults, and they remembered. Mark Wahlberg, known for collecting Rolex and Patek Philippe, was photographed at a social event wearing a Timex Ironman 100 lap. The contrast was deliberate, or perhaps instinctive. Either way, it said more than a full-page advertisement ever could. In 2021, Matt Damon wears a Timex Ironman Classic throughout Stillwater. Kobe Smulders wears one in Results. The Ironman keeps appearing, not because anyone is paying for placement, but because it fits certain characters. Grounded, competent, unpretentious people with nothing to prove. The watch remains in production. Modern versions preserve the original design language and core functionality, updated with LED illumination, interval timers, and contemporary materials. The spirit has not changed. As the brand sharpened its understanding of what it stood for, accessibility, honesty, and function, it expanded in a new direction. The Timex Weekender stripped everything back: a lightweight case, a clean dial, no unnecessary features. In place of complexity, a single elegant idea: interchangeable fabric straps that let the wearer transform the watch in seconds to suit any occasion, any outfit, any mood. It inherited the legibility of the Easy Reader, the utility of the Expedition line, and distilled them into something quieter and more universal: minimalism, not as a design trend, but as a genuine point of view. This leads to the real question: why did Timex become a cultural phenomenon rather than just a budget option? In a world where watches function primarily as status signals, choosing a Timex is a conscious refusal to play that game. It is the choice of people who have nothing to prove, including notably people who could afford far more. This is the essence of stealth wealth: confidence expressed through restraint rather than display. In The White Lotus, a character wears a Timex QGMT as a quiet statement of groundedness amid conspicuous luxury. In The Accountant 2, Ben Affleck's character wears an Expedition, not as a prop, but as a character detail. The watch communicates who this person is without a single line of dialogue. You know what's the strangest thing about this story? There are brands that spend billions trying to become iconic, but iconic status can't be bought. It is earned over the years, and that's exactly what made Timex a legend.